Welcome to Not Your Ordinary Parts, a podcast where we talk about hard things associated with the human experience with the goal of increasing awareness, growth, and healing. You may hear information from professionally licensed therapists, life coaches, healers, doctors, etc. This information is not medical advice or therapy and is not meant to replace actual therapy or instructions given by a doctor or a personal therapist. I'm your host, Jalon Johnson. My guest today is Michelle Glass. Michelle is an educator, author, certified Level 3 internal family systems practitioner, a licensed Oregon psilocybin facilitator, and her work is deeply respected by leaders of all disciplines and modalities, including her friend and colleague, Dr. Gabor Mate. Having completed almost 400 hours of direct training with Dr. Richard Schwartz, the IFS model's founder, Michelle is widely regarded as a trusted voice in the IFS community. The heart of Michelle's work is profoundly personal. Her career spans decades as a writer, editor, facilitator, mentor, and teacher. She is a survivor of complex trauma, and the practices she teaches today weren't born from theory. They were born from necessity, from lived experience, and from her own long journey back to self. Out of that journey, she created the Daily Parts meditation practice, a method now used by therapists, clients, coaches, and spiritual seekers around the world. The Daily Parts meditation practice gives structure to healing, language to the unspeakable, and dignity to the parts of us who were taught to hide. Michelle's work reminds us that healing isn't a single event, it's a daily practice of attention, compassion, and relationship carried out with presence and with love, all the while remembering that each of us are the medicine needed to return home to ourselves. So, Michelle, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you, Jalon. I've been looking forward to this. It's such an honor to be on your Not Your Ordinary Parts podcast.
Thank you for being here. And also, I gave a brief introduction, but so that the audience can get to know you a little bit better, would you mind giving us a little bit of background about yourself and how you got to who and where you are today, please?
Yeah, I first want to say I love your podcast. And when you sent me some initial questions in my bio, it moved my system so much to tears because without knowing me, you knew me. And I think that you have an extraordinary gift with your interview skills. So
thank you so much.
With that, I just want the audience to know that this feels like a very different podcast. It's one that feels that I'm known and seen, even though we hadn't known each other before you reached out to me. So, to answer your question, though, yeah, you mentioned I'm a complex trauma survivor. What I don't normally talk about, but I've been doing that more and more in the last year or so, is I have an ACEs score of 9. And for folks who don't know what the ACEs score is, it's the Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's rated from 1 to 10, although I think they need to change it for many other traumas that we can endure. But nonetheless, having survived that much complex trauma, I needed to go into therapy and was very afraid to go into therapy. So I chose a therapist who couldn't diagnose me with anything. She couldn't prescribe me with anything. I needed something holistic. And so having come to IFS through being a client really taught me a lot about the model. But, you know, in those early days with seeing Carol, my first counselor, I had to do a lot of learning about myself, and was really grateful to have experienced somebody who knew the model well and could really help bring my system through complex trauma. One day she did something completely different in therapy with me. And at the end of the session, I said, "What was that? Whatever that is, you have to, do that every single time, because everything else we've done for the last three years has been okay, but this is what I need." And that's when she told me it was IFS. She had just come back from an IFS training. And so I went home to research what it was. And a few months later, I was at Esalen with Dick doing his Eye of the Storm workshop. and that would become an annual pilgrimage for me for, I think, 16 different weeks with him over the course of probably 15 years. Some of them were back-to-back weeks. And with the encouragement of a lot of my IFS colleagues and friends, encouraged me to take my level 1. So I took my level 1, 2, and 3, got certified. Dick had seen some of my daily parts meditation practice things and asked me to come present at the conference. That became a book. So I wrote the book and then went on to do workshops and teaching of IFS intros and the daily parts meditation practice. So it kind of all evolved organically without really, well, there's no intention for me to have landed where I'm at right now, other than as a child always wanting to have become maybe a marriage and family therapist, which I'm not, but I wanted to help people. So in a long circuitous way, I've ended up where I wanted to be as a child.
Thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to ask you something about Carol, who was your first counselor that you mentioned. What does she mean to you?
She's meant different things over the years. For the longest time in therapy, she was a good mother for me, which I didn't have, which I lacked. And then as I healed, she became a really, really strong mentor. Like, she had such a strong presence herself. What I later learned was self-energy, her groundedness, her centeredness, her, like, all those 8 C's were there in full form from the very beginning. So she was a really good mentor with that. And now that, I have not seen her for, I don't know, 15 or more years, I'd have to count. Some of my little parts think about her and really love her to death. And yeah, I'm curious what she's up to now.
What was it like to spend 3 years with her, working to heal and learning to ground, and then that one day where she introduced IFS and it made it seem like you hadn't been doing? Well, you said it was different, so not to discredit the work you have been doing for those 3 years, but what was it like to step into the world of IFS?
Yeah. For me, the biggest difference between Hakomi and IFS back then, and I always make this caveat that I have not been trained in Hakomi, so I don't know if this is true or not. But my experience of Hakomi was there was never an unblending process. And so in Hakomi, when I was with her, I was always blended before I arrived at her door, during, and then when I left. And I know she probably made several attempts to help unblend, like she would mention parts, or that I have an undamaged self or place inside of me that's undamaged. And all I kept hearing, like I had little parts with fingers in my ears because I didn't want to hear her, thinking that she was just saying, "You're crazy. You have multiple personality disorder. You're Sybil." And so that was very confronting for me. But whatever she did, and I will go back and listen to that very first recording, because I recorded all my sessions, to see, like, what was that difference. But in my memory, it must have been she had done some unblending with me without pointing to a part, right? And so that space of unblending created like a buoy. Like, I was in the rough waters of the sea for a long time, but now I had a buoy. She was on the boat, maybe, right? And would rescue me, but now I had my own buoy, my own life preserver.
I think, speaking of unblending and self and things of that nature, for people who are familiar with IFS, they understand distinctly what that means. But for listeners who may not be, I just want to say that we're going to get into all of that as the conversation continues. So, but back to you. You've been very open about surviving complex trauma, and to have a 9 on the ACE, that's pretty big. And you've mentioned that the abuse came from inside your family system, and without getting into the details, I just want to ask you, when you think about the early years of your life, um, what do you remember your body learning about safety, power, and being seen?
This is one of those questions that exemplify your interview skills without knowing me. This question is like, wow, he sees me, knows me.
Mm.
Um, I noticed some parts with tears, just like when I read your first email with this question. And so, because that's happening, I'm going to ask you to reread the question.
Sure, no problem at all. When you think about the early years of your life, what do you remember your body learning about safety, power, or being seen?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't live in my body till I was in my mid 30s. So my parts learned that it's just not safe to be in this body. If I was in my body at all, it was from my chin up, literally. Like, I didn't even have a neck, it was just chin up. And that was, the rational managers trying to get me through day to day things. So, yeah, it was not safe to be in my body. It wasn't safe to be seen because my tormentors were in my life, in my family households. And so I had to do a lot of hiding, not only from them, but hiding from myself.
What does it mean when you say you didn't live in your body? Because that could be confusing for someone, and to say that you lived from your chin up. Like, can you talk about
Hmm.
that and what it means for somebody who may not understand that?
Yeah. Well, I would say, if you could look at a child who is really uncoordinated and always getting into bumps and bruises because you can tell they are not literally kind of in the body, that was a lot of the experience. I didn't know that I wasn't in my body until I was in therapy, when I would have invitations to notice something in the body, and I was like, oh, we're not going there. So it's literally this, for me, it was this experience of who I am is just up here in my head. Yeah, I could see I have hands and legs and stuff, but that's really not me. It's almost, in some ways, some derealization, but I don't know that it was that extreme. It was just, it didn't feel like my body was my own.
Mm. Is that why some people say, like, you live in your head, or you're dissociated, or you're not present? Would that be something you would?
Yes. Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
Okay. I think that for a lot of us who may have experienced trauma and we overthink or we question everything, and it doesn't allow us to feel present, someone saying, I didn't live in my body, could be like a language and a voice for their experience without actually knowing what was happening.
I could see that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think part of learning that I wasn't living in my body too was through therapy and different invitations Carol would make where I would see myself in the traumatic scenes, but not in my body. I was in a different place of the room or something.
Wow. So, what did survival feel like in your system as opposed to maybe what it looked like externally?
Yeah. Well, my system, you talked about hiding earlier. Um, I had to hide from myself, really. In order to survive, I had to repress everything. So, in addition to dissociating and not being really present or doing all sorts of things to distract myself, the biggest way to survive was repression. So, It was just too painful to know on a daily basis what had happened the day before or what might happen tomorrow. I'm noticing a lot of parts getting choked up at the moment with this. I'm a little surprised.
Take your time.
Yeah. I let my parts know that I can speak for them for this interview, but they could be close by, and they're pretty close by today. So this is a unique interview. Nobody's asked these types of questions. So it feels pretty raw and vulnerable. So I'll just go back to your question, which was,
what did survival feel like in your system as opposed to maybe what it looked like externally?
Yeah. Well, really, it was that not remembering, literally. So I'm currently watching a show with my husband called The Lazarus Project, where they get in these time loops, and it reminds me a little bit of my childhood, where it was Groundhog Day over and over again, but you can't remember it. So, yeah.
Is that something that the brain does as a way to provide protection, is maybe try and help us to forget so that we don't have to keep reliving the pain?
Absolutely. It's a really good protector of ours. And I know there's two protectors of mine who helped out in that front. So And when you say on the internal versus the external, what did that look like? On the external, that looked like for me a child who watched hours and hours upon hours of TV, but internally not remember watching anything. Like it was my escapism to watch something and zone out, but at the end of the hours of whatever it was, not remembering what TV shows I watched.
Was there a specific age or moment when, I guess, the experiences that you were living, you realized, okay, like, I'm not safe here, or I can't be me here?
Oh, that was my life growing up pretty much all the time. Yeah, it was just not ever safe to be me. Going through therapy, though, really helped provide some safety in helping to update my parts, that I wasn't in the same state that I am now. At the time I was like 30 some years old, and just those updates helped my parts realize, okay, we can start showing up in ways even if we're really blended and burdened. But post-healing, they feel quite happy and content to show up, as I am or as they are.
So I know you have done a tremendous amount of work and you've allowed those parts to unburden. But while we're here and while they feel close to you, if you could say something to them, what would it be?
To my parts? Well done. I'm really, really proud of them. And I tell them that every day in my daily parts practice. That I just love them all so much.
Thanks. I'm sure they love to hear that.
Yeah, we're a tight team.
Okay, so for listeners who've carried parts in hiding for years, what has experience taught you about staying quiet, and what would you say is the cost of silence?
Well, for a lot of us surviving trauma, it's not an option to speak. So silence is part of the baked in experience. But the cost of that, I think we have to look at it from the back end and go back forward to the beginning. Once our parts have been witnessed and unburdened, and they bring back their natural qualities and energies, that's when we see what we've missed. Right? So that's the cost of that silencing, is all that missed energy and skills and qualities that our parts have that have been squashed and tucked away because it wasn't safe. So I think it's really, another beautiful piece of the IFS model is not only can we unload the burdens, but we bring back into who we naturally were or we're supposed to be or are. And that's what gets lost.
Can there be a lot of grief or resentment when you realize what was lost and for how long, and how can someone get through that?
That's a great question. Yeah, I had grief for so long with many of my parts. And I'm choking up again, just remembering some of that work. Yeah, to know what was potential in me and not have it be lived. There's a lot of grief. And sometimes still sits there, obviously, as this question's asked. And there was a part in therapy for a long time that felt like, oh, well, grief must be a burden that we have to work to get rid of. And so through some of that work, some parts could let go of some of the grief, but sometimes it's just part of the full experience, right? We lose somebody, we lose something of ourselves. And so there is a grieving process. In fact, there was a time where my parts wanted to put an obituary in a newspaper and write the list of losses, but I didn't do that.
Wow. That is, oh my goodness. I've never thought about that, but I mean, that is putting the losses basically out there into the world. Like, I mean, man, that makes it so real because it's death.
Yeah.
It's death, and it's lost to so much. And I think trying to look at it from a space of, okay, I had to do that to get here. And now that I'm here, I can try and work to get back to me and, make up for lost time. And in doing that, I think you still have to hold space for the lost time.
Absolutely. And in fact, one exercise Carol had me do at one point was no, it wasn't her. I went through a sexual assault recovery group. They had us do an exercise with a list of what you've lost and is it permanent or is it recoverable? And that was that was in the middle of my IFS work. And so that was a really good discerning question. Is it permanent or is it recoverable? And I think that's one of the things, like I mentioned before, that's so good about this model is we can recover a lot of things. We can't recover the lost time or the last year's worth of experience of something. But yeah, we can recover. Those parts of us can bring back into themselves and bring into me that energy on some of the fronts. On some of them, it's definitely a lost thing.
Have you ever revisited the obituary idea, or no? Is that something that's gone?
I did. In fact, I almost did it when my tormentor passed away about 3 years ago. I thought, this is a good time to do this, but I didn't do it. There's too much surprising grief that came with that death.
I mean, you can't know what you don't know. And, you can try to prepare as much as you can for loss, even if it's a loss that you would think would be something that would allow you to move forward in a way that doesn't come with grief. But, I mean,
yeah,
everything brings up things. So, we talked a good amount about you and what you've been through and your healing work. And I think that special day where Carol introduced you to IFS may have put you on a trajectory to start transitioning in a way that was leading to you unblending and really starting to unburden. So I want to dig a little bit more into that because that matters. And before you created the tools and before you were able to hold space for anyone else, you had to really come back to yourself. And I want to know what that season of healing looked like for you, and not the polished version, but like the actual real work.
Mm. Yeah, well, I've been trying to write my healing memoir for about 15 years, and that's exactly what I want to do, is capture the palpable sense of what it's like to live in a trauma survivor's shoes and going through healing. It was messy. It was incredibly messy. I mentioned I had little to no access to my self energy. And so what that means is I had parts blending all the time. And what I didn't say is what brought me to therapy was my oldest daughter had turned 9, and that was the year, my age, when my abuse took a whole nother turn. And so seeing her grow reminded me of me, right? So my little
Sure.
parts were blending in a lot. And so I had tsunamis of panic attacks and flashbacks, and a lot of body sensations. So it was messy, messy years. Really, those first 3 years, well, it was probably almost a year before I went to therapy, and then 3 years of Hakomi with blending. So, not only my daughter, I have two children, they were 9 and 4 at the time. As they were growing, they reminded me of me. Being out in the world, seeing men with mustaches was a huge trigger. And so there were parts, exiles screaming to be known, and managers and firefighters trying to squelch it all, which resulted in a lot of days worth of migraines and developing cervical dysplasia and a lot of different body pains. We'll call it that, just different body pains, because parts were screaming to be known. And through that work, through listening to what my body is saying, getting to know the parts, that started to calm down enough that I could be with it over time instead of be in it all the time. But it was really, really messy. And, I'm really grateful I had a good friend who was skilled in this work, who had gone through her own trauma recovery, who helped me. My ex-husband was very loving and patient and kind going through all of that. But the big consequences, my children never got the mother who I am now. They never got the completed healed form. And that just had a lot of consequence on them.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that for someone who lived in their head and was absent from their body for a good majority of their life, to start to do the healing work and to be thrown into your body, I think your body was now saying, okay, we're going to make up for lost time. And so you had to feel everything that was suppressed. And what was it like for you when you started to meet your parts and to feel the container, feel them bursting out of the containers that they have been in? What surprised you most?
Yeah. Wow. I just want to acknowledge that these questions, as I said earlier, feel raw and vulnerable. So if people are hearing my voice shake and they don't normally hear that, that's why. These parts are really close.
Do they need anything right now?
My hand on my heart is what's helping.
Okay.
Thank you. And they like that you asked that. Yeah, most of my parts will say, and of course we can never really know because I didn't experience trauma the way some people do with remembering it, but sometimes they'll say recovery of the trauma was worse than the trauma, because in the trauma, I wasn't feeling it. I was dissociated and it was all out of memory. And so going through the healing was really hell for for me, for the parts. To re-inhabit my body with it, with remembering, literally remembering what happened was very painful. And so, Carol's guidance of, is it okay to focus there on whatever place in the body that was, often went straight into dissociation even from there, right? So it was a lot of work to get back into the body. But yeah, I think my parts, um, they knew that I had children, and they knew that I needed to show up for them, and then I needed to live a bigger, fuller life. And so they were screaming to be known.
I think that when we're trying to heal, the lens that we're seeing through may not be as clear because of the stories that our parts are telling us. And for you to acknowledge that, your parts were saying you have to show up as a better mother, or this, that, and the third, and also you shielded them from what you went through. And I don't know that may be something that was even considered, but I just want, I guess, to thank those parts for the job that they did to protect you and get you to where you can be now. Because what you have to offer to the world is exceptional.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And they appreciate that nod of your appreciation for what they did. Yeah, they soldiers on the battlefield.
Indeed. And the battlefield is not always seen or not even recognized by others. It may just be our own internal battlefield, and it could be World War VII in there. And if we don't know how to communicate, or if we're just so used to living in our head, like nobody's privy to what's going on.
That's right. Yeah, we can never know. People can put up a really good front, and by all accounts, I had a pretty good front that no one would have ever known what was going on for me.
Yeah. So doing your healing work, being able to unblend, being in your body, I'm sure it took a lot of work and a lot of time, but was there a specific moment when you realize, oh, hey, like I can trust myself now, and I can lead, and maybe not perfectly, but enough?
Yeah. I think that was something that happened over time, really, with each unburdening and then, each unblending and then each unburdening, like little by little, that closed, totally dark room that ended up having a slight sliver of a light come through. And as that light grew bigger and bigger, that's where it was like, oh, there's space in here. And it's not so much as me really noticing that I could trust myself. It's my parts like, oh, wow, there she is. We unblended enough, and there she is, right? The light is there. And then, yeah, that continued through a few more years with Carol until I got to a place where I felt like, wow, I feel really good. I don't think I need therapy anymore. And I left therapy, and lo and behold, life throws another tormentors at me and life experiences, and brought me to the epicenter of my trauma. So I had to go back to therapy, but there was enough space for me to lead for a while until another cluster of parts consumed that light again.
So at this point, you already know an IFS. You had already gotten to a point to where you had realized like I can do this on my own for a bit. And then you went on to have over 400 hours of direct training with Dr. Richard Schwartz. Um, but I feel like even in all of that, your most powerful training was the training that you had with your own system.
Mm.
And so I wanted to ask you, how did your relationship to your parts shift as you began listening to them?
I love the way you captured that because, many trainers will say the best way to learn the model is to receive it. And so true. It was born out of necessity and born out of all of that. So go back to your question. I was so struck by the way you captured that. It was like, of course, that's the way we need to learn the model is inside out.
Sure. How did your relationship to your parts shift as you began to really listen to them?
Yeah. Well, how did that shift? It's just a gradual day-to-day experience. When I did go back to therapy and worked on, my system always calls it the epicenter of the upper center, which I have other parts that laugh at that phrase, but nonetheless, that's what it's known as. And my system trusting me to get us through that was, great. And then when it came time to leave therapy again, my parts were afraid I was going to forget them, kind of like they felt like they were forgotten after leaving Carol. Mm-hmm. So that's when the DPMP was born. It was that relational commitment to, my commitment to remaining in connection with them that really helped them relax to know that they weren't going to be forgotten again.
Mm-hmm. I want to thank your parts for giving you the space to get through those questions because we're going to shift now so they can take a break.
That was a rough one, Jelon. Some of them say, yeah, no, I appreciate the questions and I haven't been this candid before.
I'm glad that I was the one that could be the one to hold space for you to do that. So thank you for allowing me the honor.
Yeah.
All right. So something that I can't believe I really left out is, what is IFS?
Oh yeah.
Can we talk about that? Yeah, we sure didn't. For someone who has no idea what internal family systems is, or what a part is, or what a self is, or a system, or the names of parts, can we get into that? Can you give a detailed explanation of IFS?
Yeah, for me, it's just a really exquisite way of knowing yourself inside and out. It's a very detailed way of knowing yourself and who you are and why you like to do things and why things are important for you. So without even going into the term parts, many of us will naturally use the language of IFS and say, oh, a friend asked me to go to see a movie with them, and a part of me really wanted to go with her, and another part wanted to stay home. Well, right there, we already have the language of it. Well, what does that mean? We can brush it off and say, oh, it doesn't really mean anything. But if we actually take a moment, like Carol did with me, and slow down and say, okay, well, let's listen to that part that wanted to go or that part that wanted to stay home. As soon as we start to slow down and go inside, really like truly, for me, I close my eyes a lot with clients, and I did it all the time as a client. You can do it with your eyes open too, but really turn inside to yourself to see, who is that? And often we'll see a little image of us. So we've got different parts, and I don't know how much of the model we want to go into, managers, firefighters, and exiles, and all of that, but I'll let you lead.
Sure. I think probably one of the most important parts, not that all parts aren't important, but for people who have suffered, is an exile. What is an exile? How does it come to be? And who's protecting it?
Great. Yeah, exiles are those parts of us or those aspects of us that endured a traumatic or attachment injury, where there was a wound, there was a hurt, and it wasn't tended to by anybody external. And so because it wasn't tended to by a caregiver or a parent, and it's often too much, if the trauma, the wounding was too big for us, that necessitated this urge to push that pain away. Like, we don't ever want to feel that again. That's usually a manager who's pushing that away, saying, no, we're not going to touch that. That was too painful. But yeah, exiles are the ones that hold the bulk of our pain. Not that our protective system doesn't also hold pain, but their exiles hold the bulk of it. And it gets exiled usually because it's too much for us as a child, or even as an adult. Maybe we don't have the inner or external resources to handle what's going on, so it gets pushed away.
And so if an exile part is being managed by another part, and that part that is the manager can't do the job, or it gets too big for that part, there's another part that sometimes comes in that's called a firefighter. What is a firefighter's job, and how can behavior look when a firefighter is activated?
Yeah, well, I love our managers who work so hard, like often 24/7, to keep it pushed away, but they're never 100% effective. So the exiles do pop up with their pain. And those firefighters do come in with all sorts of creative ways to help us get higher than that pain, or to squelch it back down again. So, some of those behaviors can be self-harm, rage, hurting others, dissociation in my case, right? Had a lot of dissociating firefighters. And without those parts, yeah, let's pretend we didn't have firefighters in our lives, in our system. We would go back and forth between, and that's happened a lot for me in my own recovery, is the exile screaming to be heard and the managers pushing them down, and this vicious cycle back and forth between that. And it's uncomfortable. And so the firefighters need to come in and do what they think they're doing to help. And it does help briefly to usually bring the managers back online, and the exiles get further pushed down.
Something that Carol spoke to you about is that a part of you that's undamaged, and an IFS that's referred to as the self. Can you expound a little bit on what the self is, and how someone can know what it feels like to be in self energy?
Yeah, I love that. The model wouldn't be the model without self and self energy. I want to go back for listeners to the place where I mentioned, that the common language we use of a part of me wanted this and a part of me wanted that. The of me is self, right? A part of me. Who's watching, observing, seeing, and noticing this? It's usually the self. The self is this place that really can never be damaged. And it has these great qualities that Dick cataloged over time, because he likes alliteration. They all start with the letter C, but they're descriptors of this really grounded state of us, our natural energy. Like if a brand new baby was brought into the world with loving parents and loving grandparents and in a safe environment, that baby would grow up with tons of self energy just imbuing from it. It's a grounded, natural, true self, its essence. But because we do have attachment injuries and different wounding, then different parts come online and help us navigate this life. But yeah, self energy, and we might as well name the qualities for people, so that as you're listening and you're like, well, what is she talking about? How do I know if I'm in self or not? If you're ever feeling calm, curious, connected, compassionate, curious. Did I already say curious? I always say that twice. confident, courageous, creative, and clarity. So this really still place inside of it's both a still place and it's a very enlivened place, but it's an enlivened still place.
Thank you for that explanation. I think when someone can really understand their internal system, um, you almost speak a different language. I always say that there's a language of IFS. Um, and so it's obvious that you've gotten to that point from the work that you've done. And you were able to build off of it because you were able to create the daily parts meditation practice, not just as a tool, but a path. So I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what may have been missing from the model that daily parts meditation practice made possible?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily something missing so much as either undertaught or at least underheard by the trainees. And that is the daily post unburdening maintenance check-in. So there's a whole arc of the model, which we won't go into all of that, but at some point we get permission to witness exiles to really get how bad the pain was and go through some healing with them and ultimately unburden them and bring back in their qualities, right? But that's not the end of the model. The end of the model is we invite self to come back every day for about 30 days to check in with that part to see how is it doing post unburdening. And that post unburdening check-in piece, I can't tell you how many times in trainings and over the years I've heard IFS professionals go, "What? I don't remember learning that," or "I didn't know you had to do that." And it's such an essential piece because one reason of like 7 or maybe 8 or 9 now reasons that burdens can come back is because the system wouldn't let self come back in to check with the part. And so the part needed to take the burden back so that self would come back. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like if you're not going to come attend to me, well, I'm going to take this burden back and I'm going to make life, the way it was before so that you have to come listen to me, right? But if self does check back with the part, and it's not because self didn't, it's usually because parts of the system prohibited it in some way. Then at the end of that 30 days, this is where the DPMP comes in, is my system learned it didn't want to just be forgotten after 30 days. Like after I left Carol and then came back with a new counselor, my parts were like, "We're still here. We'd like to be known. And when you leave Ellie, we want you to still be with us," right? And that's what the daily parts meditation practice meditation is all about, is checking back in every day with our unburdened parts. Now, on the wall behind me, for those who can view this, there's my unburdened parts. Listeners can't see it. It's a bunch of pendants that are externalizations of what my parts have chosen. And so instead of having to go through, there's like, I think 35 or 36 parts up there now, all 36 in a day. No, it was one part each day in a rotation process.
What can it look like to check in daily? Like, for someone listening who understands but wants to know, like, okay, well, how does it work? Like, what does the core of the work look like, and what does it mean to check in daily?
Yeah. So again, we have to go back to who's doing the checking in, right? We can have some managers who are on board with, yep, we got to make sure we're checking in with these parts. And that's helpful in itself. That can be good, but we want to ensure that self is there. So the first step for me is always noticing who's here inside, who's wanting to do this and who's leading. inviting my parts to gather around and then give me space so that I can then connect with a part. So first you want to ensure that you've got enough of your own self energy, that you're in that centered, connected, curious, open-hearted, loving place, and then connect with that part. And, if it could be done before a part goes through its unburdening and healing, or it can be done afterwards, but it's just like connecting and saying, hey, Jalon, how's it going today? What do you want me to know? How is it since you're unburdening? What do you want me to know? How are those qualities that you brought back in? How are we using them? How do you want to use them tomorrow or next week? Just really, it's creative. You get to it's intuitive. Self just knows how to connect and listen to parts.
Can we talk a little bit more about unburdening? Like, what does it mean for a part to unburden, and what is it letting go of, and how is it doing it?
Yeah, I love this. For some reason, the unburdening process meant so much to my system. Of course, it was great to connect with me, but this whole ability or opportunity to have the ability to unload all their burdens was just incredible. So what that looks like is, to do it authentically in the model is first we've got a self-to-part connection. We witness the part. And when we witness the part, we get to really uncover what those burdens are through that experience they had, right? So maybe it's a lot of worthlessness. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's physical pain. Maybe it's beliefs they've come to believe about themselves. And when self can connect with that part and say, wow, I really get how bad this is, or how bad this was for you. Do you feel I get that? And when the part says, yeah, you do get it, then it's at that point when the part is given the opportunity, if it would want to, and most parts do, because like who wants to carry around a bag of trash on their back, right? You mean I can finally get rid of this bag of trash after 40 years? Yes, please. And in IFS, we offer elements. So light, fire, water, earth, wind, anything else that the part would like to let go. And we let the part choose that. So many of my parts love water. So it's usually at the ocean or it's at some pond or something. And we invite the part to scan their body, collect up all those burdens, the beliefs, the feelings, the sensations, anything that they know that's really was never theirs to begin with, or anything else that was put upon them, and let that element transform it, because we know those elements are so powerful. It can transform and release all of that for us. And so the parts literally, like in my own personal unburdenings inside, when I'm got my eyes closed, I see that part literally like pulling the energy and the debris in it. I'm not a good artist. I always wish I could capture the imagery of this because it's so sci-fi. It's like if I could capture all these burdens that come up and either into their hands or out of their mouth or somehow out of their body and then given to the element, and maybe it flows away with the wind, or maybe the stars take it. Then the body is empty. This vessel is clean. It's like a pristine, clean vessel finally that they came into the earth with, right? And what you didn't ask, which I think is a good segue to just complete this piece, is inviting that part to reclaim their natural qualities and energies. So because all those burdens are gone, they can bring back into themselves who they naturally are. And so you can just see those qualities come in and fill the body. And it's a 180 feeling, from a lot of heavy weight to a lot of freedom and lightness and openness or vastness.
So for someone who is just starting, because speaking of unburdening, that doesn't happen like first session or second session. It could take years. For someone who feels overwhelmed and afraid of what they'll find inside, or they're convinced that they're too much, and they're carrying burdens. Their parts are burdened. How do you introduce the work?
Yeah. Well, for some clients, it's a lot of me just being self in the room for a long time, for as long as it takes, and little tiny invitations or inquiries, and sometimes some psycho ed around, you know, maybe pointing to a time in the session where I see there's some aspect of their self energy, right? And seeing if they can notice that too. But yeah, it's a lot of it is a lot of holding self energy for a while. Um, and then, as their system begins to feel it's safe to let their self energy out more, then we can begin to do some of that deeper work. And I'm giving the messages to the protectors all the time that we're not bypassing you. You're the boss. As I like that phrase that Dick says is you're the boss. But there is this different way we can help. And if you could give us your permission, we could make things a lot better for you. And I'm also giving messages to the exiles in there that, they're worthy of my time, they're lovable, we want to hear it all, we want to get it all, and in little bites, so that the system can let the client's self stay there with them. It's a process. It's definitely a big process. And as you heard at the beginning, like, I was blended all the way through 3 years of my work with Carol before some little unblending happening before we could even get to unburdening.
Mm. So speaking of the healing work and unburdening, and parts giving permission, what happens when someone meets their parts in an expanded space, like for instance a psychedelic journey?
Okay, we're going to the psychedelic space now. Yeah, well, that can look different for everybody, but most commonly it's seeing just some little version of themselves or a younger version of themselves inside, usually going back to some memories or scenes. The medicines, the different psychedelics, have the potential to do a lot of witnessing with our parts and I say the potential because we want to get permission from the protectors to go do the psychedelic and to have the journey. But if they've given permission, the psychedelic can open up that space to bring our parts forward and to bear witness to them. So we will see literal versions of ourselves, and sometimes they're different versions, not literal, but imaginary or creative. What's the word I'm trying to look for? They could be like cartoon characters or something that's not exact replicas of us. We can see them in different forms.
Do you feel like psychedelics amplify the internal system or soften it?
I love that question. That all depends on the person and where they're at, and it's going to be unique from journey to journey. If somebody's really ready to, and their system's ready, whether it's conscious or unconscious, it can amplify that internal landscape and say, guess what? Here's this part that you need to heal. It's been trying to talk to you for years in this way that you've not listened, right? And it lays it out for you. And other times for people, what the system most needs is that deep feeling of self energy or connection with the bigger self, the bigger planes of self energy. And so sometimes it can just open up the whole experience of being in self energy or out with God or the universe. Sometimes you can get a little mix of both of those, but in my experience, it's usually one or the other. But yeah, it has the potential to do both.
I think the psychedelics are becoming more conversation pieces lately. But for people who've only heard about psychedelics from headlines or haven't explored that space at all, how do you explain what they are and I guess what they can really do in a healing context?
Yeah. Well, I want the audience to know first and foremost that I'm a product of the Nancy Reagan just say no era. And I did. I just said no to everything except for in high school. I used alcohol a lot. And I think I only did that in retrospect because there was ads everywhere for alcohol normalizing it. I think if we had ads normalizing psychedelics, I probably would have chosen that too. But nonetheless, the fact that I'm a psychedelic facilitator is pretty hilarious for some of my parts because it's like, no, we just said no. We're this good girl of just say no. Um, but there's a huge difference between street drugs and psychedelics. And I'll say, street drugs in air quotes for our listeners. Those kind of substances take us away from our pain. You know, heroin, cocaine, meth, all of that will take us away from what's really, it's taking us away from our exiles. It's those firefighters using a substance to get away from that pain. And that makes it really alluring and can make it addictive, right? If that's the way we're going to try to handle our life is only through drugs, street drugs, then it could become addictive. Now, Gabor is a friend and mentor of mine, and I believe in the ways he talks about addiction is it's not about the substance, right? It's about what drives us there. So, so nonetheless, street drugs will take you away from your pain. Psychedelics actually bring you to your pain. So you asked if psychedelics amplify or quiet the system, right? Or illuminate or whatnot. Psychedelics can open up the system of parts that need that healing and show you this is why you've been in so much pain all this time, right? And bring some self energy to bear witness and love up those parts and help them to heal.
Well, someone may hear what you said and say, okay, well, I would rather be taken away from my pain than to my pain. Why would I choose something that would make me sit in suffering?
Yeah, good. Well, I love that you used the sit in suffering quote, right? Because that's psychedelic therapy. We're not doing this just to go do this and just to be in it. We're there to actually liberate. And when we can use IFS with psychedelics, we've got two potent medicines together. We have the psychedelics that can help illuminate our self energy and the parts that need healed. And we've got IFS that can provide this framework for how we can witness and provide missing experiences for our parts and unburden it. So, yeah, we would want to go to the pain so that we can unburden it and liberate it and have those parts bring back their natural qualities and energies. Earlier I said it's like a 180 going from extreme weight to vastness inside. Now, who wouldn't want that? If we could do that, if we could have I won't say promise, if we could have that hope for people, and if we can do some really good preparation work with the protectors to get their buy-in to do this work, then we've got a really powerful potential for somebody to finally liberate something that's been shackled forever.
I love that. Okay, so what exactly is a journey? Like, what does the process look like and feel like, especially when it's held in a safe therapeutic space?
Yeah. Well, back in the 70s, they used to call it trips, right? Trips and journeys are synonymous. It's like you're going on a road trip. You don't know, you might know where you're kind of going and how you're getting there, and there's everything in between. So with a psychedelic journey, when done with intention, starts with preparation work. And that is a series of weekly preparation sessions with an IFS informed guide in this case, where you get to know the protectors who have any fears around the journey. And that's one of my passions. And we'll maybe talk about that later about why I like this work. But bringing a lot of safety to this work is important by being with our protectors. So we want to do a lot of really good prep work, making sure that we have permission to have the journey. And then journey day itself, depending on the medicine somebody is taking, lasts from anywhere from 2 hours to 36, depending on what kind of medicine you're taking. Yeah. And to know how your guide is going to sit there and facilitate with you is important. And then on the back end, as the journey wraps up with the integration phase, which is usually a few weeks on the short term. Integration is unending, really. It's lifelong, but there are different phases of psychedelic integration, and usually several weeks. We know that there's a critical window for each psychedelic based on about the length of the journey. So maybe that's a little bit too much minutia, but we can go there if you want to.
Sure. What is it about psychedelics that make them such a powerful tool? And for those who may have experienced what's referred to as a bad trip, what may have been missing? Because you talked about preparation and then integration. For people who experience or who have taken psychedelics and had a bad experience, what could be the cause of that?
Yeah, the way I hold bad trips in my frame, and it's through an IFS lens, is when we don't have permission, number one, or we think we have permission that, maybe some parts gave permission, but kind of exiled the other ones who they knew didn't want to give permission. But I see it often as different parts that usually managers, although it can be firefighters, but most often it's a manager or a collection of managers who are afraid to relax into the experience. So you get a lot of this holding on in fear, or it can be they do let go for a little bit of time, but then they come back and grab a hold again. So there's this looping of letting go and then grabbing back hold again, letting go, grabbing hold again. And that can feel like a bad experience, a bad trip experience. And the other one is sometimes the exiles are just showing so much trauma and pain, and it's coming through in whether it's literal imagery from what we remembered or through symbolic form. It can feel very frightening for the system. And when done in a very quick way and without feeling a lot of internal resourcing, that can feel like a bad trip. So there's a few different ways. It's, in my mind, it's, different parts blending and not letting self-energy be present. And that's why I have that strong caveat that psychedelics can facilitate certain things. And the can is dependent upon our parts and the permission we get with them.
So one of the most important things is getting permission from your parts to, I guess, surrender to the experience. And if someone who has experienced trauma has never felt safe in their body and doesn't know how to trust, how difficult can it be? And how important is preparation in those instances?
You hit the nail on the head. That's totally it. Yeah. When there is a lack of trust in oneself, it's going to be exceptionally difficult to trust and relax into the experience, let alone whether that's on your own or with a guide, right? Some people do try to do this on their own, which I don't recommend, especially for trauma survivors. But yeah, having that trust is really important. So that's where that preparation work comes in. I will say, for anybody who has little to no access to self-energy just in regular therapy sessions, is really not an ideal candidate for psychedelics. I know that psychedelics can open up a lot of self-energy, but the way you ask this question is just really germane here. If I had had a psychedelic journey before my IFS, I'm pretty darn sure it would have been a really bad trip.
Mm,
um, and so, yeah, it's really essential to ensure that somebody has enough self energy and that the parts are trusting enough. And the most important piece, too, with this is that they trust their guide. And that's something I hope we have time for conversation around is talking with the sitter.
sure. So, what is a sitter or what is a guide, and how do they play a role in the experience?
Yeah, that's at the heart of my work. I have a real strong passion for creating safe and attuned psychedelic guide spaces, right? So journey spaces. A psychedelic guide or facilitator is that person who is dedicated to sitting with the person for the whole entire journey. Um, Most guides out there in the underground world do only journey work. They don't do prep and integration. And that's unfortunate. Many of them now are starting to incorporate prep, journey, and integration. But nonetheless, the journey guide is there to pay attention and to keep you safe and hopefully provide self energy for you through your journey. That now that's an IFS informed psychedelic guide. Without an IFS informed psychedelic guide, hopefully they've got good ethics. They're safe. They know how to keep you safe. But an IFS informed psychedelic facilitator does sit there with a lot of self energy throughout the whole journey, very attuned to their client and their client's needs. And journey days, journey space is very little therapy, if any at all, and more of really trusting the self energy of the client, or what we call the inner healing intelligence. So it's really critical that the guide has a lot of self energy to listen to and attune to you as the client.
Mm. Okay, so integration. What is integration, and how important is it after the psychedelic experience?
Yeah. Well, I want to start with a quote that's totally not about psychedelics, just to kind of tie it in. And so I'm a soul collage facilitator, and they say that making a soul collage card without reading it is like creating a banquet without eating it. And
Mm,
I think having a psychedelic journey without doing integration would be like having a banquet without eating it.
mm,
So with integration, it's it's a number of things, but one of them is making meaning or making sense out of it, but also in taking those lessons that we've learned and applying it to our daily life. So integration can literally be short term in a few weeks of like, how did I make sense of this? What were the parts involved? What happened maybe through the IFS lens of the model? To building it out to a longer overtime term of incorporating maybe a new walking routine into your life, or a meditation practice, or certain insights. And because I'm an IFS informed psychedelic guide, the way I have loved to help people with their integration is on the parts end of the spectrum. So what we talked about earlier with the daily post unburdening maintenance check-ins, if a part unburdened in the journey itself, great. Let's help ensure that self gets to connect with that part for 30 days after the journey. And then maybe shift into a daily daily parts meditation practice after that.
mm.
So there's lots of different ways. I have this integration menu is what I call it. There's, it's like a smorgasbord. Pick the ways you want to integrate, but these are some pieces that I talk about of how to integrate and what to integrate.
Sure. You've said that healing is not a single event, but a daily relationship. And I know we shifted a little bit from you, but I want to come back a little bit and just ask you this question. With everything that we've talked about, especially with integration and the daily parts meditation practice, what does self-leadership feel like in your system now?
Hmm. Yeah, I want to go there. And I also want to say I think healing actually can be a one-time experience as well as a relationship thing. But what does self-leadership look like in my system now? Yeah, my system got excited with this question because uh having a daily parts meditation practice now for 12 years, it really fuels it's like the breath of my life with my system. So what that looks like is self really feels like default in my system because I've unburdened so much of the traumatic experiences that I lived through. So it's like that aces of nine. It's like the opposite corollary. Like I'm now like at a positive nine. If aces was a negative nine, now I'm a positive nine, right? And having self as default means that most often I'm in self energy with the unburdened parts of me, their own self energy, that fractal nature of self energy, of my self energy and their unburdened self energy. So, it could be something like, I don't know. I could say to Henry, one of my top managers, "Hey dude, you've been working really hard. Thank you so much for those PowerPoint slides. Can we get another hour's worth today?" Right? And appreciate Henry for that. Or, "Hey little ones," and I could call out my 4 little exiles and say, "Hey, we're going to go to the beach this weekend. Do you want to go have fun with Holdy on the beach?" Or, "Hey, Demetria, can you find a good movie and some snacks for us because Ariadne's been working really hard." So it's like I know who works hard in my system. I know their names. I know who they are and can appreciate them and call them in for what they're wanting to do for my system. And not only do they have a good relationship with me, but they have a really strong teamship. Or is that even a word? Teamship?
There's now.
Partnership. Teamship. Yes. Partnership with each other, right? They
Mm,
want to help each other too now, not in the old ways that they had to, but because they each are alive with their reclaimed skills and qualities.
mm,
So it feels different and very vast and effortless and just so much fun.
sure. Hearing you describe it like that with so much animation and excitement, I mean, that really paints a picture of what an internal family system is. It's a team.
Mm-hmm.
It could be almost anything we see externally, whether it's a team, whether it's a family, whether it's a group of people who help each other, a group of friends. And so hearing you say that, like asking the different parts what they want and if they would be excited with this or this or that, I think it really gives a great depiction of an external depiction of what an internal family system is.
Oh, I'm glad. I captured it that way. Early on in my meditations, when I created my meditations for the public, I used the example of, if it works for you, think about them as a classroom of kids,
Mm,
right? And so let's say that this is my classroom of kids behind me, my pendants on the wall. After 12 years, I would know each of those kids really darn well by
right.
name, know their skills, know who they relate to the best, which kind of pods work together best, right?
Mm,
And so it feels very effortless. I know for some listeners might feel like, oh my gosh, that must be daunting to know who's who and all of that. But for self, it's effortless.
mm,
Self is naturally designed to be connected and curious, and so it's just effortless that way.
mm. Thank you for sharing that. It's such a personal and vulnerable picture of your internal world. So I appreciate
Mm.
that. When you think about what makes this work possible, not just for individuals, but for the world, what feelings come up for you?
Wow. Um, it's almost like being choked, verklempt with so much hope and
Mm,
tears of gratitude of so much hope. We see so much pain in the world, and to know, I think because I've come from that -9 to a +9, I know what's possible. And so this model has that really permanent healing capacity. So I do get very excited to know that this is possible. I often talk a lot about this place of what we don't know is possible. If we see a bike on the street and we don't know what a bike is, well, why would we pick it up and ride it down the street if we didn't know what was possible with it?
mm,
You know, and most people don't know that healing is literally possible, that permanent healing is possible. It's, most modalities are helping manage symptoms, right? Helping us make our way through the days rather than getting to the direct core, the root cause of things to debride and bring, ointments and healing to it, right? So I get super excited.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing you say it like that, it made me feel hopeful. And I think if we look at it like that, like like you said, if we look at something and we don't know what it is, we wouldn't know what to do with it or what the potential could be. But if we learn that healing is possible, and then we see that bike and we say, oh, that's a vehicle to get me on the path to healing, we know to pick it up, start riding it, and moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and with so many people doing IFS, some of it is, I would call, parts work light. They think they're doing IFS, but they're just doing parts work. Maybe they're just exploring this is a part and that's different than self. So it's like picking up a bike and not knowing, oh, we've got 12 gears on here, right? There's this whole arc of the model that we can actually heal parts. And then, like I said at the one of your questions of what was kind of missing from the model, it's not that it's missing, that it's underheard, is this post unburdening maintenance check-in and then the DPMP after that. That brings so much vivaciousness is what the words is coming in. It doesn't seem like it's the appropriate one, but so much life to our potential.
Mhm. Let's say someone's listening right now and they've heard you talk about psychedelics, about your experience, about unburdening parts, about the 12 gears on the bike, and maybe they've never done parts work. Maybe they've never spoken their story out loud, but there's something about your voice that's making them stay. If you could speak to the part of them that still believes they're too much or unworthy of love, what would you say?
Oh, I would say I see you and I hear you and I see myself in you. I used to feel that way too. And I'm here and I love you and I'm here to listen and be with you. It's safe now.
Thank you for that, Michelle.
Hmm.
You spent years walking yourself home and then turning back to help others do the same. When you think about legacy, not just the tools you've built or the work you've shared, but the feeling you want to leave behind in the people you've touched, what would you want to be remembered for?
Hmm. Hmm. That's a good question. I can't remember what I wrote.
Good.
Yeah, I think what comes up most is I'd want to be remembered for being an example. Years ago at Esalen, a lot of us would say, I want to be the poster child for IFS. And I guess I would want to be one of thousands or millions, hopefully, of examples of what is truly possible with healing. And to be known for, yeah, my ability to be present with others and to be a mentor for them along their paths.
Mm,
Whether it's with the DPMP, whether it's with psychedelic assisted therapy or not, or just regular IFS, just that I'm another person who could walk somebody else home or
mm,
alongside with them.
mm. Um, I think you've already reached that if that's what you're hoping for, but keep going.
Thank you.
With with all the work that you're doing to help others, what is it that you want people to know most?
The healing is possible. It sounds like I'm beating a dead horse with that, but yeah, when we don't know what's possible, then you're not going to know for what to work for. But yeah, I want people to know that true, lasting, permanent healing is possible. You can actually lift thousands of pounds of burdened weight off of yourself and live a very dynamic, self-led life.
Mm. All right, we made it to the last question. If you could use your platform to educate anyone who might be struggling with their mental or emotional health and might be uncertain of how or where to start, what would you say?
Hmm. Well, I would remind people, or it might be new to them, to know that they have everything they need inside of them, even though it doesn't feel that way. They have their own self that's going to help guide them through, and they can start trusting that. But that we also need others, and so trusting yourself will find other trusted people. And so to just start asking for people, ask for resources, ask for what you need. And yeah, I do think that your own intuition will lead you to the people who you can most trust. And you'll end up having both the internal and external resources that you need. That you have it all. You just have to uncover it.
You told me about a magnet that you have on the refrigerator in your listener space that says something about medicine. Can you quote what that says?
Yeah, it's not my quote. It's a quote from Maria Sabina, who is um, who's I'm having a menopause moment. I'm losing the word. Who's credited for bringing psilocybin mushrooms to the public, at least more widely known. And her quote is, let's see if I can get it right. Never forget that you're the medicine, is how it ends. Um, I wish I had it with me, but I don't.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So your self energy is the medicine. You have everything in you, just like I said before. Um, I wish I had that quote directly in front of me because
Mm,
I could have given it more justice. But yeah, never forget that you're the medicine.
mm,
And the medicine is self energy. I teach that in my psychedelic courses, is that self energy is the medicine. And we're just opening up space for that, whether it's IFS or not. And if I can kind of end with this too, since you're bringing up the medicine or this quote, is that IFS sessions can be a non-ordinary state of experience, just like psychedelics. So I teach that, IFS and psychedelics are two potent medicines on their own in this non-ordinary space.
mm. Thank you for sharing that. And it may be hard for some people to grasp that concept that they are the medicine. But I think what therapy and IFS and daily parts meditation and even psychedelics is doing is walking you back to yourself, that
Yes.
unburdened self that, um, like you said, if you were a baby and you were born with love and attunement, like who could you be had you not experienced trauma, or if you weren't carrying burdens? And I think that is what I get from
Yeah.
that quote the most, is you're the medicine. So if you can get back to that person or that state of being, that's all you need.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to leave our parts out of that, because our parts, when they are unburdened, are
Hmm.
full of their own self energy, right? So it's this collective self energy inside the system of who we are.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
Hmm.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for being willing to be vulnerable, for being willing to push through the difficult emotions, and just for who you are and for sharing.
Thank you so much, Jalen. It was a privilege to be here. I looked forward to it for many weeks. And yeah, it means a lot to have been asked some really vulnerable questions. And I hope that what I shared was useful for some people.
I'm sure it will be. If somebody wanted to find you online or on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah. I'm not going to get my social media handles and everything right, so maybe we'll put them in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll put
But
them in the show
you
notes for
can find
sure.
my website at the listener llc.com. We can put that in the show notes. And I'm available by email too, and we can put that in the show notes as well. But yeah, I've got a lot of different courses coming up and a very fun psilocybin IFS psilocybin retreat through soulology coming up. So there's a lot of very fun things that you might be interested in. So we'll put all that in the show notes too.
Sure. And your book and all of your resources are available at your website as well.
They are, yeah, and through Amazon, though I know a lot of people are boycotting Amazon now. So that's, you'd have to find it through me then.
Sure. Okay. Well, again, Michelle, thank you so much for this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for how you do it.
Right back at you. Same to you. Thank you.